She'd spent 2 years running from the sky because she'd killed 3 American soldiers. Now, 35,000 feet above ground with 275 passengers depending on her, Elena Cross had exactly 40 minutes to remember why she was once called the most lethal A-10 pilot alive, and to forgive herself for her worst mistake. Before you watch full story, comment below from which country are you watching. Don't forget to subscribe for more amazing stories. The captain's coffee cup sits on the beverage cart, and Elena Cross knows something is wrong. Not because of the cup itself, small oversight, happens all the time on commercial flights. But because of when it appeared. She watched him drink from it 20 minutes ago in the galley, watched him wipe his mouth, watched him turn toward the cockpit. Now it sits abandoned, still steaming, forgotten in a way that violates every protocol Elena learned in 8 years of military flying. She doesn't move. Doesn't alert anyone. Instead, she turns another page in her dog-eared paperback romance novel, the one with the shirtless man on the cover, and lets her eyes track the flight attendant walking the aisle with rehearsed smiles that don't quite reach her eyes. Seat 18C. Middle of the cabin. Completely unremarkable. Elena Cross is very good at being unremarkable. She's 34 years old, sunburnt nose, Mickey ears pin on her backpack next to the Cinderella Castle and Space Mountain keepsakes. The cargo shorts have a Minnie Mouse stain on the left thigh, authentic, from the ice cream cone she dropped on day 2 of her 4-day Orlando trip. Her sneakers are beaten-up Converses, the kind that scream, comfortable vacation shoes, and she's clutching a stuffed Stitch doll like she actually bought it for a kid back home instead of for herself, for comfort, for the weight of something soft when the nightmares get too real at 3 in the morning. The businessman in 18D glanced at her twice during boarding and then looked away, having already categorized her, exhausted mom, probably a teacher on spring break, definitely someone who spent $200 she didn't have on park tickets and overpriced churros. The college students in 18B had seen the Disney shirt and smiled sympathetically, that look people give to adults trying to hold on to childhood. Nobody was looking at her twice. Nobody was looking at her. Because they didn't know that beneath the sunburnt nose and souvenir pin sat Major Elena Reaper Cross, USAF, retired, call sign earned not for confirmed kills, though she had plenty, but for her ability to stay over the battlefield longer than any other pilot. Stay, and stay, and stay, until the last round was fired, until the last friendly soldier was accounted for, until even death itself got bored waiting for her to leave. She'd flown 156 combat missions across 8 years. She'd made gun runs at altitude so low her wing tips had clipped tree branches, the rush of ground fire turning the sky into metal rain. She'd brought her damaged A-10 Warthog home on one engine and a prayer, hydraulics leaking, airframe screaming, but wheels down, canopy open, alive. She'd saved surrounded platoons in the darkness before dawn, destroyed enemy armor formations, pulled her eject handle exactly 0 times because she didn't leave her people behind. The Warthog wasn't built to be beautiful. It was built to be brutal. A flying tank with a nose cannon that fired 30mm depleted uranium rounds at 4,000 rounds per minute, enough firepower to level a city block if you held the trigger down. And Elena had been one of the best Warthog pilots in the entire United States Air Force. Not because she was reckless. But because she was methodical, precise, and completely committed to the idea that every soldier on the ground deserved to come home. The businessman to her left had no idea those hands, now holding a trashy beach novel, had once gripped that control stick with absolute authority at 10,000 feet, orchestrating violence with surgical precision. He had no idea those soft eyes, probably watery from sun and chlorine at water parks, had scanned targeting pods and identified military positions with the intensity of someone whose mistakes meant body bags. The young woman reading her Instagram feed across the aisle didn't know that Elena's eyes were cataloging exits, counting rows to emergency doors, identifying the 2 strongest male passengers within her section while appearing to be absorbed in a mediocre plot twist about a love triangle that didn't matter. Elena didn't fly anymore. Hadn't touched aircraft controls in 2 years, 3 months, and 17 days. She kept count because counting was easier than thinking. She'd walked away from the sky because the sky had demanded she carry weight she couldn't put down. The kind of weight that doesn't get lighter with time, just more familiar, like stones in a backpack you forget you're wearing until someone asks you why you walk hunched. But old instincts don't die. They just wait. They sleep like predators, and sometimes, just sometimes, they wake up. The flight attendant, name tag reads Martinez, reappears from the forward galley, and Elena watches her face in the tiny reflection of her book's glossy cover. The smile is gone. Real worry etches lines around her mouth, the kind that comes from knowing something passengers shouldn't know yet. The kind of knowing that paralyzes flight crews because protocol doesn't account for terror. Elena's tactical awareness, dormant but never truly sleeping, suddenly comes online like a weapons system powering up. Like her brain remembered what it was trained for and didn't ask permission. She closes her book. Doesn't make it obvious. Just slides a bookmark in, the kind of thing a tourist would do, and lets her eyes drift out the window at the clouds passing 40,000 feet below. They've been climbing toward cruising altitude for about 90 minutes. The flight is smooth. The weather is clear. But there's a tension in the cabin now, barely perceptible, the kind only someone trained to notice would catch. Martinez walks back to the intercom. Elena's hearing, honed by years of communicating over jet engines and radio static loud enough to vibrate bone, picks up the urgency in her voice even though she's too far away to hear words. Then Martinez glances up toward the cockpit. Worry flickers across her features before she masks it again with that professional smile that doesn't reach her eyes. Elena's pulse hasn't elevated. Her breathing stays steady. But something inside her, some part of her that was trained to recognize emergencies before they announce themselves, before the first distress call is made, is suddenly very, very awake. The captain was drinking coffee. Alone in the galley. An unusual moment of vulnerability, the kind that only other military personnel would note. And now he's missing from his post, his coffee forgotten, and the flight attendant is scared in the specific way people get scared when they know something terrible is happening but don't understand it yet. Medical emergency. Has to be. Nothing else makes sense at 35,000 feet. But her gut says something worse. 3 minutes pass. Elena watches without watching, a skill you learn when surveillance matters but you need to remain invisible. A flight attendant whispers to another crew member near the rear galley. Their eyes flick toward passengers, that specific kind of assessment people do when they're trying to figure out what resources they have available. One person who can help. One person who might know CPR. One person who's a doctor. These are the calculations flight crews make when something breaks in the sky and they're the only help that exists. One flight attendant disappears into the forward galley and doesn't come back out. The seatbelt sign illuminates. No announcement. Just the chime and the light, which causes a subtle ripple of confusion through the cabin. There's no turbulence, no weather warning, no announcement explaining the reason. Why would you turn on the seatbelt sign when the flight's been smooth as glass? Elena fastens hers. Everyone around her is doing the same, confused, the way tourists and casual travelers are, fumbling slightly, uncertain. Not the way a tactical mind does it. Elena doesn't just buckle. She tests the mechanism, assesses the padding, ensures she can unbuckle in under a second if needed. Her fingers verify the latch works smoothly twice before she releases it. Old habits from ejection seat procedures don't disappear. Then the announcement comes, crisp and professional despite the fear underneath. Ladies and gentlemen, if there is a doctor on board, please press your call button immediately. We have a medical emergency. Doctor on board, please identify yourself. This is not a drill. Medical emergency. Standard enough. Elena has been on commercial flights before, always as a passenger, never again as crew. That door closed 2 years ago. She's heard medical emergency announcements. They happen. Passenger has a heart attack. Passenger has a seizure. Someone's diabetic and their blood sugar crashed. Standard, manageable. But Elena's eyes catch the slight acceleration of Martinez's movements as she hurries to prepare what looks like a medical kit from the galley. There's a tremor in her hands. Fear tremor, not normal tremor, not the tremor of someone managing a routine situation. Two possibilities spin through Elena's mind with the speed of a tactical computer: passenger medical event, which happens on flights regularly, maybe once every 1,000 flights, or crew medical event, which is rarer, more serious, more catastrophic. But the urgency, the way Martinez disappeared into the cockpit instead of toward the cabin seating where passengers sit, the way the other flight attendants are making those specific eye contact assessments. The aircraft lurches. Not turbulence. Elena has flown through thunderstorms that would terrify civilian pilots, through hail that dented her canopy and wind shear that nearly ejected her sideways. She knows what turbulence feels like. This is something else. This is a sudden altitude change, uncorrected, the kind a commercial autopilot doesn't make and shouldn't make. This is the aircraft responding to a manual input. Someone in the cockpit just adjusted the aircraft manually, and they did it badly. Passengers around her gasp. A drink spills in the aisle, cola spreading across the carpet. Elena doesn't react outwardly, but every nerve ending ignites like a weapon going hot. The plane levels after 5 seconds that feel like 5 minutes when you understand what they mean, and the movement smooths again. But the damage is done. The cockpit is no longer flying on autopilot. Someone has taken manual control. And whoever has manual control doesn't know what they're doing. Elena unbuckles. The businessman next to her glances over, but she's already moving into the aisle with purpose. A flight attendant, a young man, maybe 25, with a name tag that reads David, hurries toward her with a forced smile, the kind trained into every flight attendant at Flight Academy. "Ma'am, please return to your..." "Both pilots are down," Elena says quietly. "Military hard." No question mark at the end because it's not a question. It's a statement of fact, because she can read the evidence like intelligence from a recon flight. That's why you needed a doctor. That's why the plane just dropped. Someone's fighting for control up there, and they're not a pilot. David's professional mask cracks like thin ice. His face goes pale. The color drains from his cheeks in a way that confirms everything Elena just said. She's right. Both pilots. Incapacitated. And the aircraft is being hand-flown by someone who has no business touching the controls. "Ma'am, I..." The aircraft drops again. Hard. This time not corrected smoothly but with a violent surge that throws Elena against the armrest. Around her, passengers scream, genuine terror, the kind that comes from feeling the aircraft fall beneath them. Overhead bins pop open. Luggage tumbles into the aisle. A child 3 rows back cries. The plane levels, but the movements are wrong: nose up, nose down, yaw to the left, then a correction that overshoots, the aeronautical equivalent of someone fighting a steering wheel they don't understand, someone who learned how to fly from a YouTube video and is now trying to execute a commercial landing. Elena's hands instinctively reach for the nearest seat to steady herself, and her muscle memory recognizes what's happening with absolute clarity. A pilot in command is completely incapacitated, and someone with minimal to zero flight training is trying to hand-fly a Boeing 767. A 767 is a massive aircraft, heavier than most fighter jets by a factor of 10. It doesn't respond like a small plane. It doesn't forgive. It requires firm authority and precise inputs. Someone in that cockpit is panicking, and 275 people are about to find out what happens when civilian aircraft require military precision. The intercom crackles. A woman's voice, shaking so hard Elena can hear the fear vibrating through the speaker, distorting the transmission. This is Flight Attendant Martinez. We have an emergency. Both pilots are unconscious. I repeat, both pilots are incapacitated. A pause, and when she speaks again, there's a plea beneath the words, something that sounds almost like prayer. If there is anyone on board with flight experience, anyone who can fly, please identify yourself immediately. Silence. 275 people. 275 heartbeats. And in that silence, Elena understands that every single one of them is waiting for someone else to be the answer. Every one of them is hoping that someone braver, smarter, more qualified than they are will stand up and say, "I can save you." She walks to the cockpit door. David reaches out, his hands shaking. "Ma'am, you can't." Elena pulls her wallet from her cargo shorts pocket. She doesn't need to, but it's better this way, better to show, not tell. She flips to a card she's carried for 2 years without ever wanting to use it again, FAA commercial pilot license, properly signed and dated, multi-engine type rating. And below that, military credentials. USAF Major. Service number. Call sign, Reaper. The photo shows a woman in uniform, hair pulled back, eyes focused, jaw set. A woman who belongs in a cockpit. David's eyes go wide. "I need you to open this door," Elena says, and her voice is completely different now. Not tourist. Not the woman reading romance novels about impossible love. The voice of someone who has made life and death decisions at 4,000 feet, who has orchestrated close air support in darkness, who has saved lives by being absolutely certain about her actions. Right now. David fumbles with the door code. His hands shake as he enters numbers. But the door opens. Chaos. The captain slumped over the yoke, completely unconscious, his head resting against the side window. The first officer in his seat, also unconscious, body listing to the left, his hand still loosely gripping the armrest. Their radio headsets still on, still connected, and Elena can hear Seattle Air Traffic Control trying to reach them with increasing desperation. United 926, respond. 926, report your status immediately. The aircraft is on autopilot, technically stable but descending at a shallow angle because someone, Martinez, probably, in a panic trying to help, hit the altitude select knob with shaking hands while attempting CPR, and now the plane is flying itself toward the ground, 100 feet per minute sinking toward the earth. In 40 minutes, they'll be at 10,000 feet. In 50, they'll be at ground level. Martinez sits in the observer seat, her hands hovering over controls she doesn't understand, her eyes red-rimmed and desperate. "I didn't know what to do, they just collapsed. I tried CPR but nothing." The captain's coffee, he said it tasted weird, like almonds, and then 5 minutes later the first officer complained he couldn't see straight, said everything was blurry, and then they both just. She gestures helplessly at the unconscious pilots. "I don't know what to do." "Out," Elena commands. "Everyone out. Now. Close the door and keep everyone away. I need space to work." Martinez bolts. David follows. The cockpit door closes with a hydraulic hiss, and Elena is alone with 2 unconscious pilots and the responsibility for 275 lives hanging in the air above them like a weight suspended from a single thread. Elena slides into the captain's seat. Her hands find the controls, different from her A-10, heavier response, different speed, different everything about how you manage lift and drag on a commercial aircraft. The A-10 is a fighter. Fast, aggressive, responds to input like an extension of your nervous system. The Boeing 767 is a transport. Heavy, stable, wants to fly level more than it wants to turn. But the fundamental truth remains unchanged: something flies, something tries to fall, and a pilot's job is to negotiate the difference between the two. Throttles. Yoke. Autopilot panel. Muscle memory from 156 combat missions and 8 years of military flying takes over, pushing aside 2 years of guilt, trauma, and deliberate forgetting. Elena's hands move with absolute certainty born from thousands of hours in a cockpit. First action, stop the descent. She disconnects the autopilot and manually corrects the pitch, raising the nose with smooth pressure on the yoke. The altimeter reading stabilizes. 35,000 feet holding. The descent arrested. The aircraft no longer falling toward the earth but holding steady in the sky. Second, Assess the threats. Both pilots breathing, pulses present but slow. Bradycardia, probably, not tachycardia. Something in their systems is slowing them down. Poisoning. Gas exposure. Hypoxia. Doesn't matter. They're not flying. She is. Her eyes scan the instruments. Altitude, 35,000 feet. Airspeed, 480 knots, stable. Fuel, adequate. Heading, 295 degrees true. Outside temperature, -57 Celsius. All the data that defines their universe at this moment. United 926, Mayday, Mayday, Mayday. Elena's voice is ice over the radio, professional, calm, the voice of someone who has trained for exactly this moment in 100 simulator sessions and in her mind 1,000 times since retirement. Both pilots incapacitated. Passenger pilot assuming control. I am military-trained A-10 pilot, not current on commercial procedures. Need immediate assistance and vectors to nearest suitable airport. Static. The void where communication lives. Then, 926, say again, did you say passenger pilot? Affirmative. Major Elena Cross, United States Air Force, A-10 Warthog pilot. I have 156 combat hours and currently have control of this aircraft. I need vectors to nearest suitable airfield and talk-down guidance for landing procedures. Standing by. A longer pause. Elena is already thinking through the variables, fuel consumption at this weight and altitude, distance to suitable airports, runway requirements for a 767, descent rates, approach patterns. She's already calculating whether she has enough fuel to reach Seattle-Tacoma International, maybe 45 minutes away if she manages descent and approach correctly. Then, 926, this is Seattle Center. We copy all your information and we're clearing airspace ahead of you. Major Cross, can you maintain control of that aircraft? Elena's hands gripped the yoke. The last time she flew, she had control. She had coordinates. She pulled the trigger.